Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. It's late here in the UK, but we've just finished some more raid testing in Uldea on the Battle for Azeroth beta, and I thought I'd give some feedback about what clearly the design philosophies that Blizzard are implementing with the raiding, which is a big deal on our channel. Like, I'm all about the raiding. It's my favorite thing to do in WoW. And now this has been the third boss. We've got another 4 to test over the next few days, so maybe there'll be more to add then. But I thought I'd show you this because Uldea is looking pretty good. It's looking okay. It's glorious in its design. It's absolutely gorgeous inside. Really good. It's a mix of Ulduar with some elements of Nazmir, which is the darker Horde theme zone, the Troll zone, all seeping into it. And you get the feel of this place that was once extremely grand and is now kind of fallen into ruin. But all this old mad tech is still working really well. So every time I've been inside, I'm just like, this place is impressive. Really impressive to look at visually. So we got to test 2 more bosses tonight. The first boss that we tested a while, I think it was like over a week ago now. It was alright. It was nothing majorly special. It had some debuffs and adds to deal with. But one thing to always bear in mind with what we're looking at here is that Blizzard are testing classes at the same time as we're testing the bosses. We're looking at what the bosses do, but at the same time they're testing us. So they do some certain things, like the boss HP is ludicrously large. So this is heroic we're testing right now, but the boss HP is crazy. So sometimes you'll be doing like 6 minutes of a pull that's included bloodlust and things like that, and you'll realize we're only at like 50% boss HP, which isn't right in any means. And also they're doing like very low tank damage, much lower than you would expect from a heroic encounter. The tanks are taking very little damage, and on top of that, raid damage is generally very, very high. So they're testing like what are the healers output in AoE healing situations, right? That's what they're testing. They're testing like how good is DPS over a long period of time. Who starts to really pull ahead? Maybe they need reining in. Who's really starting to lag behind? Perhaps they need buffing a little bit. That's how they do class balancings. They put you in these scenarios for a really long time. So imagine you're testing a raid dummy every time you do a boss test for like 10 plus minutes in order to figure out where exactly people lie while they're doing cleave, while they're doing AoE and all those kind of things. So what you're seeing now isn't what's going to be on live by any means in terms of like how much damage the raid's taking, so don't panic about that. What we can do though is look at the mechanics and see how certain changes Blizzard has made are translating into the real world. So I'm going to start with a negative straight off the bat, and I'm not going to stop harping on about it because it's terrible. It's the global cooldown change. You can see every time I do a pull just how awful this is now. It's changed the pull from being the funnest part to actually really irritating. Like, I was playing an Orc Mage. Blood Fury was broken again. You probably remember the video I did last week on the broken Orc Warlock. So Blood Fury was broken again, so we decided, in case the fight was buggy or something like that, that we could bring Blood Furied characters so we could push it to a different phase if we wanted to see more of the boss, but not use it to actually, you know, smash the boss and go, lol, 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 we killed the boss. Because when you're testing, the intention isn't to kill the boss. That's not what you're after. Like, oftentimes you can kill the boss and then you wipe intentionally so you can go again and try different things out. When you're testing, it's a very different environment. I know a lot of people who've never tested will not really get that, but understand that we're not there to kill the boss. We're there to see everything the boss does and how do we deal with it. What are the mythic mechanics? Can we get an idea of how that's going to work? Those kind of things. We're not aiming to kill the boss. If we're going to kill the boss, we'll just kill all the raid, restart, go again. So the first boss was the best boss I've seen in ages. This thing is so good. So good. It's just called Mother. Right now, it's called Mother. Mother is 3 danger rooms, is what they've come up with. And it's a little bit of a mix of the Sisters of Elune. I believe they're called the Sisters of Elune from the Tomb of Sargeras. In that what you're intending to do here is when you're in a room, the room is generating energy. And what you have to do before it reaches 100 energy is you have to transfer the entire raid to room number 2. Right? But every time you pass through the gate, the big blue gate, it detonates and debuffs the whole raid. So very similar to Sisters. Certainly if you ever did Sisters Mythic, you'll be very aware of this idea of crossing. When you used to cross from Lunar to Solar, it used to AoE everybody. This is what happens here. It does a huge amount of damage. So with cooldowns, you can do like 3-4 people. But generally speaking, you're going to be moving 2 through at a time so the healers don't get overwhelmed. And each danger room has different things going on in it. So you'll have danger rooms. The first one has winds, which knock you back and forward. And then as soon as you put one person through the barrier, then ads will start spawning on the other side, and they need to be killed off as steadily. They need to be killed off, but they're also casting a lot. So you can clearly see why Arcane Torrent was probably finally nerfed, because it was realistically holding Blizzard back from things they could do. Because if you had a lot of Blood Elves, this would make this really easy, because you wouldn't have to coordinate shit in order to get it done. You'd send through your Blood Elves, you could just Arcane Torrent them down pretty regularly and have that as so many emergency backups should interrupting go wrong. That Blizzard probably was like, this is really irritating. Like, Arcane Torrent's a big problem for us in PvE, because we can't really use like interrupts as a coordinated measure anymore, because Arcane Torrent just nullifies that, and so many people are playing Blood Elves that we're really going to have a big issue here. So what they've done is just take that away and say, okay, now we've got rid of that, now we can start playing around with some mechanics. This fight was awesome. So in the second room, there's a load of ads, and then you've got to transfer the boss. So you can't target you can't target what's on the other side. So the guys in room 1 can't target the ads, and the guys in room 2 can't target the boss. So you need to be balancing who's transferring when, who's got good interrupts, who's good with ads, and then move them back. You could AoE the wall, so you could drop things like, I was on my mage, so you could drop Blizzard, and that would tick into the other room. Like AoE heals could do that. And also things like splitting ice. My ice lances were going through there and stuff. I don't think that's intended, but for now it's working anyway. Well, that's not the point. And in the third room, they brought back Halion Slicer. For any of you who remember Halion from back in the day. Cataclysm, he was the last boss of Cataclysm, the Ruby Sanctum. The Slicer travels around the room, and then you have this combination of winds blowing you in one direction, and Slicer, which can go left or right, spinning around the room and knocking you in all kinds of places. Ton of fun while you're doing it. Really funny. And then there's AoE on the floor and all kinds of shit. Fucking such a blast. Enjoyed the shit out of this fight. It was just everything was funny. It was like, remember which way the winds blow, because the winds kept swapping. So it's south to north, north to south, and now it's clockwise slices and anti-clockwise slices. So you need to prepare for that. And you just kind of running in circles and having a laugh while you're doing it. And also the boss takes a load of extra damage in the last phase, so you can kill it off. But really nice coordination. Can't see it being pugged unless it's nerfed heavily. We talked on the web show about whether or not Heroic should be puggable. I don't think Heroic should be puggable by most pugs. Like a really advanced team of friends that pug, but they kind of get a really quality group together of good communication and things. That's not the same as like the average pug that you'll find in the group finder. I think Heroic should be a guild activity. I think that's where it should be. I know some of you will disagree with me, and that's totally fine. It doesn't matter. But I'd be very surprised if this fight went live anywhere close to what we dealt with tonight, because that was some heavy damage and big coordination needed, and some really good communication in order to coordinate those guys across there. And it was interesting to see, obviously, why they changed certain things in the game in order to accommodate this. The next boss we did was awful. It was really bad, like the worst boss I've done in a long time. Super boring. Kind of like a new version of Varamathras. Just involved like killing 3 ads, then it turned into a whirlpool, and then you dodged some lines that were really easy to avoid. But once again, that doesn't mean we can't take it away from it. It was a terrible boss, super boring. But what we did see is the lengths Blizzard has gone to prevent people being able to cheese this. So it's kind of like a butcher. It's the DPS check boss is what it is. And the way they're doing that is they have this debuff. I believe it's called Contagion. Contagion, which just bounces around people. Now, there are ways of maneuvering it, but we can't get rid of it. And on top of that, if you get hit by things in the fight, you gain a debuff, which increases the damage you take throughout the remainder of the fight, and it never runs out. So if you get, when she turns into a whirlpool and disappears and then starts shooting the lines at you, if you take all those lines, you'll get this debuff stacking really high, and then you'll die because you'll just take so much damage. As the fight goes on, the damage just keeps ramping up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and that's how they're dealing with that. But you can't ice block it. I tried that. Rogues can't cloak it. You can't bubble it. You can't do anything to prevent this stacking buff, and even getting rid of the debuff. So obviously they learned from Varamathras is people found ways of, if you've never done Varamathras Mythic, that's okay, but the technique of doing that boss involves essentially nullifying the mechanic. by some clever positioning of players on a regular basis in order to stop this jumping debuff from going any further. So you can manipulate that. That's what we always do in raiding. That's why raid testing is fun, despite the fact it makes you bored. I'm already bored of this fight, right? It makes you bored of the raid instance before it hits live, which is the drawback. But the other side of it is you don't know what's going to happen, and you start throwing this like decade plus of experience at the fight to see what sticks. Can we do this? Can we bait it? Can we manipulate this in a way? Can we AoE this through the wall? All these kind of things. Like, you've got to test these things out to see if that's possible. And we tried everything to get rid of this debuff, and there's no way in hell it's going away. It's just a shame the fight was so garbage. But it's interesting to see that Blizzard has gone to massive lengths to prevent immunities, preventing all these tools that players have from bypassing mechanics. Like, they really would seem to want to get away from that in BfA. Instead of making it like... so one thing we can say is they have tried this in Legion. It didn't work. And the way they did it in Legion is by forcing people to use immunities. They forced a lot of mages to constantly be ice blocking. It was a big meme at the time of Tomb of Sargeras. They forced people to soak things using immunities, so they could eliminate immunities from the makeup of the fight. If we force players to use them, then they're not going to use them to nullify something else. And the only way they could do that is by putting in an absurd amount of one-shot mechanics, which Raiders were just like, this is so boring and lame, because it's not even about a bad play. Sometimes the game lags. It's an internet game. Sometimes there's a lag for somebody or anything like that, and it just wipes the whole raid. It's not fun. It's not interesting. It's actually just really tedious, and they got rid of that, thankfully, in Antorus, which led a lot of people to think it was like a super easy instance, which it obviously isn't. But this time around, they seem to have figured out a good number of ways of just making it impossible to bypass things. And that was kind of cool to see. Despite being the most boring boss I've seen in years, it was kind of really cool to see that they've gone to great lengths to ensure that everything players can do, like vanishing, like if you get targeted, if I vanish at the right time, if we... at one point, we moved me and a hunter out, so I had, because it jumps to the nearest player, so I put my ice block on as his debuff ran out, and it still jumped on me. It was like, nope, still there. I'm immune to all damage, but this thing is still there, and it's still doing its job. So that was pretty cool to see, is that Blizzard is finding ways around cheesing. They're going to great lengths to prevent cheesing of their fights. And I'm grateful for that, because immunity stuff is just annoying. It's just boring. And they probably learned their lesson from Argus. If you don't know an Argus Mythic, a certain ability, well, we call it chains, was being somewhat RNG bypassed by classes who were just popping immunities before the boss did it. And if you were targeted, you just didn't get it. And therefore you prevented huge amounts of raid damage going out by just not having the debuff in the first place. And they've got rid of that. They're like, okay, we found a way around that and we're going to do that. So that's what I took away from tonight, from learning experience. Other side notes, these characters are scaled. I use quotations there because you can never tell how good it is. But it certainly feels incredibly slow. The Frost Mage currently is doing crazy damage. Like, I was ahead of most people on pretty much every fight by like almost 2k DPS sometimes. That's a massive margin in a world where you're doing like 8k DPS. So Frost Mage is definitely overtuned, but still super slow. So not fun. A lot of people won't correlate that, I don't think. It's like, you're doing crazy damage, you'll be top of the damage meter. Isn't that fun? No, not really. Because, one, it's beta, it doesn't matter. It would probably be tuned down to normal. And on top of that, it still felt really clumsy and really slow to play, even with the scaled up stats. One has to wonder, because they're trying to, some of you have probably brought this up before, but I'll bring it up here if you haven't, is they're trying to ensure, like, guarantee that higher item level stuff will be better for you, right? So you can't make that mistake, which is great for the casual player base. It is great for them. They live in an item level world. Equipping the highest item level stuff should theoretically be an upgrade. It does seem, though, that the way they're going about it is crushing the shit out of secondary stats. Like, absolutely crushing them. To give you an idea, I leveled a little bit today, because they put in some 120 content I want to film for you guys, but I manipulated like the gear rewards and stuff to be kind of ideal for a Frost Mage. You know, I got a lot of haste and some crit to try and get to the ideal stats for what I wanted. And I was using the new flask. I never used any of the new potions. The new potions are kind of interesting. They send out a wave of energy. I haven't even used one yet. I wasn't sure when we were going to try and use them, but I did use new flask, which is just an imp buff. But it does seem that they're going that way. It's like most of your damage is just going to become from how hard your spells hit, rather than augmenting your secondary stats. Now, we can say, wait a minute, the scaling might be off, and also this is the first tier of raiding, so we shouldn't expect our secondary stats to be too high. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of reasons for this. I'm just letting you know that right now, even in raiding, it still feels extremely slow. It's like super, super slow compared to anything close to what we had probably even in the early days of Legion. I've checked some footage, and I certainly don't remember ever thinking in Emerald Nightmare that my class felt really slow. But it does in BfA. So that's something to keep an eye on if really slow gameplay is a problem for you, which it is for me. Slow gameplay is an issue for me. It's certainly something that's very off-putting about BfA is everything feels incredibly slow. Like a Blood Death Knight, our tanks just stopped playing Blood DKs because they're so slow. They're painfully slow. Like, you're sat waiting for a rune for like 3 or 4 seconds. You're like, this is just not working for me, you know? But that's the only real side note I want to add to this. Other than that, all day looks decent. Like I said, I've only done 3 bosses, but I'll have another 4 to show you pretty soon. So hopefully I can show them off. But there you go. There's some ideas on what's happening with raiding in BfA so far. Some ideas that Blizzard's going with. Love to see your thoughts on it. Is that the kind of thing you were hoping to see? Is less reliance on immunities and things, and being a little bit more responsible, or are you kind of gutted that if you enjoyed playing your mage or your paladin, because every now and again you could just bypass that mechanic, and no, not this time. See you later, guys. Bye bye.